Hey, Boker Tov. Today's daf is daf Chof Gimel, famous daf in the Nidrim. We'll see why it's famous towards the end of the Shiur. So yesterday we were talking about cases where
crime.
Yeah,
it's my share your side. Remember, it's mum over. It's my share your side. It's the chiddush my share.
Today's the Arsa. What's the name?
Tzvi Baruch Chaim.
Tzvi.
Chaim Baruch Tzvi. I'm sorry. Chaim Baruch Tzvi.
Chaim Baruch Tzvi.
Chaim Ben Tzvi.
Chaim Ben Tzvi. Okay, you should have a Hashem. It's also your aunt's yard site today. My mother-in-law, Chai Rachel Bas Chaim Akiva Levi. So all those Hashem should have an aliyah, and we should, and the Rachel Chai Rachel Bas Perel should have a refuah shalema, as well as Yom Tov Lipman Ben Vorafei Chaya. May they have a refuah shalema. So today's daf. Today's daf, we were discussing at the end of yesterday's daf cases where we said that the halacha is he could be posech with charata. A person could just say that he regrets it, and had he thought about it carefully, he did it in a moment of anger, he wouldn't have made the neder. That's also a good pesach for a rabbi to be matzah neder. But we'll see, you need a rabbi to be matzah neder or shalosh edyotos. We'll talk about that later. Even if he swears by the God of Israel, that's also considered something that you could be matzah neder for. There was a discussion about that. First we said not, then we said yes, he could. So we started. We told a few stories about somebody who came to be matzah neder, and the rabbi who came to be matzah neder, his own neder was looking. He was looking for a heter. He was very honest. He says, "No, I would have made the neder even under those conditions. I was smart enough to see in advance these issues, and I would have made the neder anyway." So they couldn't find the heter. And when he realized that the rabbi who was being matzah neder was upset by this, he was irritated. "I can't find a heter for you." He says, "Had I known that, I would have irritated you so much, I wouldn't have made that neder." So that's what we came up with yesterday. Just heard it yesterday. So had I realized that, I wouldn't have made the neder. And that was a heter. Now we said the Gemara said he was matul and afshay. He found the pesach for himself, but the Ran we said at the top of the page said on the second line on Chav Gimel Amud Aleph, the Ran said lo shiat Rav Schor Latzmi, was a matzah for himself, but he used that as a heter when he went to another rabbi. And Rav Nachman, also a story with Rav Nachman. That was a story with Rav Nachman. Rav Schor came before Rav Nachman. Then we had another story where another story with Rav Shimon, the son of Rebbe, at the end of yesterday's daf, who had a neder to be matzah, and he came for the rabbis, and they said, "Well, had you known this, would you have made the neder?" "No, I would have made the neder anyway." They couldn't find an opening for him, and they were going back and forth from the sun to the shade to the sun. They couldn't find a heter. Finally, Butnis, Bereder of Abba ben Butnis, the son of Abba Shol ben Butnis, said, had you known when you made the neder that you would have so troubled the rabbis that they're going back and forth to find out, would you have made it? And he said, "No, I wouldn't have made the neder under those conditions. I would have never made it l'chachila," and that was something that he didn't. He says, "I didn't think about that. I didn't foresee that. I should have, but I didn't foresee that." And they were matzah based on that. That's a pesach. Had I realized that I was so upset the rabbis who was trying to be matzah neder,
they're going to be so upset that they can't find a
that's a petach. Yeah.
Or they're going to find a petach.
Either way, they could have found right. Fine. So they were matzah based on that. Now we have another story. Rabbi Shmuel, the seventh line on Chav Gimel, that's where he left off yesterday. Shmuel Rabbi Yossi, he had a neder also that he was looking for a heter for. He was looking for rabbis to annul his neder. Also, came for the rabbis. Amrullah, they said to him, "Did you, when you made the neder, did you have this in mind? Had you thought of this, would you have still made the neder?" Amrullah, "Yeah, I would have made the neder anyway." The Drai said, "What about this reasoning? Had you thought of that, would you have made the neder?" Amrullah, "Yeah, I would have made the neder anyway." Kamnazim, and again, the same kind of a story. Several times they had, "Is this a pesach?" Now, keep the chasa hahu katzra. There was a fuller, a cleaning man, dry cleaners, let's say, who saw what was going on and how he was setting the rabbis, the mitzvah rabbanim, that the rabbis were troubled by this man, by Rabbi Shmuel Rabbi Yossi, that they were trying this, trying that. He was driving them crazy, effectively, you'd say. hit him. He hit Rabbi Shmuel Bar Yossi, this cleaning man, this dry cleaner, hit Rabbi Shmuel Bar Yossi with the basket, with his fuller basket, with his utensil over there. He hit him with the basket. Amr. So now Rabbi Shmuel said, I wouldn't have paid the netter had I known that he's gonna hit me with the basket. He was matter for himself. Again, it doesn't mean literally himself, but he was matter. How is that a good heter? That's not something that could have been foreseen, right? Who we learned yesterday, we mentioned yesterday in the Ran. Here the Gemara says, the Gemara is referring to the Gemara later on in Samach Dalet. That's not something he could have foreseen. We saw yesterday that if it's nolad, if it's a new circumstance, the circumstance changed. He couldn't be matter. The whole idea of matter is that we know that milam was never a netter. Why? Saying that had you known such and such, I didn't foresee that. I should have foreseen it. I didn't foresee it. Oh, I didn't foresee it, so therefore we let him off. But if a new circumstance arose, something that couldn't have been foreseen, it was impossible. That's not something that he would have still made that because he couldn't have foreseen that. It was impossible. It's a new circumstance. So here how could you have expected that he could have expected that the guy would hit him because he upset the rabbis that he couldn't find a net, they couldn't find a head for his nether? Could you have found something? I know he couldn't have foreseen that. But Tanina ain't posting low benetter. That's we learn later on the Bryce and Samachdal that you don't find benola, ain't posting low benola. If it's something new, that's not a Pesach. Because the whole idea of Pesach is, had you realized it, you regret it now. You're coming to us now. You obviously regret it. But had you realized it, and we said that even post Mecharata, even going forward, but you had to be able to foresee it. You could have realized here. You couldn't have realized that this was going to happen. High love. That's also not nolad. Why? So he answered him. Rabbi Meir said to me, "This is nolad." He says, "No, it's not nolad. The shchicha pikuri the mitzar rabbanan. It's very common that people mitzar the rabbanan and therefore other people come to defend the rabbis and they push them away. Who are the Epicureans, Michael? The shchicha apikuri, like Epicurus. Is it from Epicure, or was Epicure's name? There was the Epicureans, right? Or it's also sort of Hefker. Could be that the Epicure itself came from the Lashon. The name, is he called? They say Epicurus' name because they emanated from Epicure. Or it could be that Epicure itself is the source of the Epicure is Hefker. Is that
Epicure eating?
No, there was
food?
no. There's different kinds of Epicure, but there was a person called Epicure once. You understand? Epicurus, right? So basically, no. So the question is, was he like an Epicurus or that kind of a person who caused trouble? So that's how the word Epicurus came from Epicure. Or was he himself? They attributed that name to him because he was Hefker. He was Mafker, what the rabbi said, that kind of a thing. Yeah. So
creation as not from God.
Right. That was one of his attributes. So high love no, and this could have been foreseen too. In other words, you could have foreseen that if you trouble the rabbis, you're going to get beaten for that. Maybe he didn't realize that him not finding a Pesach would be the thing that causes the rabbis to be troubled, but he could have troubled them. So it's not Nola, and they were matzah based on that. Another story.
The Masechta here dealing with changing your mind on a netter. Why is that not Nola? Now do we know people change their mind?
Yeah.
What's the difference between that and you're going to irritate some rav?
No. So changing your mind, when you say changing your mind, changing your mind. So that's what's called Pesach B'charata. That's what we've been discussing. No. So, and Allah we said is you could even do that. You could change your mind. Hilchot Posach B'charata. I regret it now that I do it. I don't want to do it anymore. Till now it was a good net. I don't do it again. Yeah. That's it. That's also a Pesach. That's also Pesach. That's what a Tarsan Dharma is about. That's what a Tarsan Dharma is about. You go to the rabbi, say, I regret what I did, and good, and you're forgiven. What do we do with the Tarsan Dharma?
No, I understand. But in all these cases, you have to go to these cases. He changed his mind.
No, exactly. So the whole, if you hold that then changing mind is good enough. But if you learn until we saw yesterday, and the shita was, and the rabbis hold that ain't poskim charat, it's not enough to say I changed my mind. No, the change my mind is until now was a good netter. Until now was a good, but I don't want to keep it anymore. That's simply poskim charata. If you hold poskim charata, you're right. That's all you need to do. I don't want to do it anymore. I regret that I do it. But if you hold ain't poskim charata, And these rabbis apparently felt that they don't want to just, charot isn't good enough. They want something to say, I made a mistake. Had I not, I didn't realize this. I should have realized it and I didn't. Milchatchila wasn't a good neder. Nafkamina could also be, is it the Tarsan Dorm we say is lemafreya, going back first. So if you were over on the neder in between, or you chayav for that. So yeah, but basically, you're right. The Tarsan Dorm means he's oked and lemafreya, and all he has to say is, I regret what I did, which is what we do Rosh Hashanah of Yom Kippur. What do we do at Tarsan Dorm? Yeah, that's what we're saying with charata and pasim charata. That's good enough. So you say that's all you need. You don't need the rest of the stuff. Well, you need the cases. We need the case. We need to learn that. Now we're going to learn that. We're going to learn about Kol Nidre. We're going to learn about things. We're going to do stuff. It tells you all different cases. Other halachas that we learn in how do you make the neder? When is the neder chal? You need atar sadarim, but what makes a neder? That's what we've been discussing. Another case, Divisu Dabaya. We're right before the wide lines of the Gemara on Chaf Gimel. Amaraf. Divisu Dabaya. Abaya's wife Havilu Barza. She had a daughter, apparently from a previous marriage. Havilu Barza. She had a daughter. Amar Likrivoi. Who Amar Likrivoi? The Rabbi said, I want her to marry one of my relatives. That's what Abaya asked her. Listen, this is your daughter. I know she's my stepdaughter, whatever. I want her to marry one of my relatives. She said, no, I want her to marry one of my relatives. I don't like your family so much. Amar so Abaya said to her, Titzra Hanasi Alecha. You can't have any pleasure from my assets. If you go against my will. And if you go against my will and you marry off to your relatives. Uzlis, she went against his vow and she went against his intentions. Uzlis Baba Sodachi, she went against his will and she married the daughter off to one of her relatives, not to one of his relatives. And married off to her relative. Rav Yosef. Now that would triggered the neder, right? He said, if you marry off to one of your relatives, you can't have any enough from me. That triggered the neder. Came before Rav Yosef. Rav Yosef was one of Abaya's rabbis. Rav Yosef Amarlei, had you known that she was going to go against your will and she was going to marry off her daughter to one of her relatives, I just said, would you have made the neder? Amarlo. He says, no, I wouldn't have made the neder. In other words, he only wanted to scare her, but he had no really intention. He didn't really want it. He said, I made that neder because I didn't want her to do it. I figured if I say you can't have any enough from me, if you marry off, I figured she'd listen. Rashari, Rav Yosef released the neder based on that, and know the neder. Says Gemara, Mishari Kai Gaf. Think about all the other cases. Says, listen, I did this, I made the neder, but I didn't realize that this was going to be the repercussions later on. Here, one can say the repercussions. Here, it's the issue. It's the issue itself. If you marry her off, you fulfill the condition. If you marry to your relative, you're going to trigger the neder. Mishar Kagavna is, can you be mat or neder in this manner? Yes, you can. But Tanya, again, the same idea is because what are we discussing? We're discussing Nidrim that you didn't really mean. That was what the beginning of this parak is about. Abar Nidrim, the first one is Nidrim of motivation, or you're inciting them because you want them to do a certain kind of an action or not do a certain action. So here again, this is that kind of an neder. Any time you have a story like this, we see it a bryce like this is by time he made a neder on his wife that she can't, let's say she can't have enough from him if she goes up to Yerushalayim Regel. But Avral Daito, she went against his will, Basla Regel. Both Rav Yossi came for Rav Yossi, not Rav Yosef, Rav Yossi. Amalo, Elo Yesideh Shavasat, had you known she would go against your will, Vola Regel, Kluma Daito, where you made that neder, Amalo. Amalo Lo, he says, no, I wouldn't have made the neder, the Tira Rav Yossi. So you say same thing idea that it was matter. The question, of course, that the Ram brings down constantly here is, do you even need a Tar Sadar? Isn't this simply incitement? So it's not like the first case. The first case of the Mishnah we talked about is, remember, they're arguing, they're handling over an item. And he says, the seller says, I won't take less than 4. Everything should be also to me, I take less than 4. And the other guy says, the buyer says, it should be also to me if I pay more than 2. They both had intentions for 3. They didn't really even want to make it. They didn't really mean to make a neder. It was just handling. He said, I'll never take less than 4. I guess I'll never pay more than 2. They didn't really mean it like that. They know that that's how you handle. They wanted to wind up with 3. There, you don't even need a tar sadarim. Here it's mashma, you needed a tar sadarim because the neder l'chara was chal, because you could see it. Is it simply encouraging. Obviously, in both these cases, the last case, he was trying to get her not to go to Shalim, or in the case of Abaya's wife, he was trying to get her not to marry her, not to marry off the daughter to her relative. So it was simply, he was trying to motivate them to follow his intention. But still, in this case, you still need Atar Sadarim. He was Matar Neder. Could very well be that the Gemara doesn't say that those kind of cases are cases where you don't need Atar Sadarim, that it's not even an Neder at all, because that's not one of the 4 Nedarim. It says Bruzin, Avai, Shgagas, and Onsen, where you don't even need Atar Sadarim. Here, apparently, you needed Atar Sadarim because it could be seen in both ways. Now, now we're still discussing the first of the 4 cases in the Mishnah, where it's a neder of motivation, nidrei zruzim. So now the Mishnah goes on. This is really a continuation of the first Mishnah. Rav Lezer ben Yaakov Omer, a man wants to encourage his friend. Reuben wants to encourage Shimon to eat at his house. So he also makes a neder and he says, listen, if you don't eat at my house, you'll never be able to have enough of my assets again. I forbid you from having enough of my assets. If you don't come and eat with me today, I'll forbid you. That was the kind of neder that he meant. Says Yochel Etzlo. Now, the Mishnah, the way it reads is that the Mishnah goes on, like there's no comma over here. Yomar takes out the law. Yomar, kol neder shani asud leader, any neder that I'm going to make in the future, hu batal, it's void right now. As long as he remembers when he made the neder that he said that. Now, the whole Mishnah doesn't really make any sense. I'm trying to encourage, Reuben's trying to encourage Shimon to eat with him, and he says, this is going to be asur to you. But he says any neder that I'm going to make in the future is batal as long as I remember it right now. So the Gemara asks right away, what's going on over here? This doesn't sound like when case we keep the Amalek Kol Neder Shani Yasud Lidor. As soon as he says any neder I'm going to make a batal, so Shamalei Velasi Badei, he's not going to listen to him. And on the one hand, he says, if you don't come eat with me right now, you can't have enough from me. And the other hand, he says any neder that I make now is batal, is null and void. So if he says it's null and void, he's not going to listen. He's not going to come. Okay, the neder is not chal anyway. The Ran at the bottom of the page says, this case doesn't make any sense. Keeping the Amr Kol Nidrei, Lo Shamalei, the Ran says, 3 lines from the bottom of the page. Lo Shamalei Lo Yabei, if you should fire down, Mazuman Shein Neder Chalav Shekvar Batul Hamazaman. Then the inviter, Reuven, Arius Matul, the dinner that we must listen, he could have said, well, maybe he didn't hear it exactly. The Gemara could have given different answers, but below Ori, he brings out an extra, but here is, remember, what do we should remember? He just made the net right now. He said, the way the Mishnah reads is, Reuben says to Shimon, if you don't eat with me right now, if you don't come to my house, you can have enough from me again. And also all the dam that I make are batal, but I have to remember what I said. What do you remember? You just took place right now. What's going on? The whole thing doesn't make any sense. So keeping the Amr Kol Neder Shani Yasur. Pardon? Yeah, future dam, maybe, but he didn't say that. Right. No. Maybe actually is the one that I make right now. Okay, it could be, but it still doesn't make any sense. It still doesn't make any sense. The cases don't seem to be going together. Now, remember whenever the Gemara says Sur Mechsra, it changes the pshat entirely. It's not like a word is missing. That's a Grais, that's a Hagah in the Mishnah or in the Brisa. Here we're talking about. Here we mean literally something's missing from the Mishnah, and we'll explain now. Reuben wants Shimon to eat at his house, and he's urging him on, and he says, makes a neder, and he says, what? If you don't eat with me now, all my assets are forbidden to you. Nidrei ziruzin hu. That's the nidrei ziruzin that we've been talking about since the beginning of the parak. That's simply a neder of inciting or motivating. I'm trying to get you to do something, and it's meaningless. You don't even need a tar sadarim. And now comma or semicolon after those words. In other words, that's a continuation of the first Mishnah. The first Mishnah gave the case with a buyer and the seller, the 4 and the 2, right? And we said that they don't need a tar sadarim. And Rav Meir Shapiro says, you know what? This is also a case like that. And he says this and this. So you're going to usher all my assets if you don't eat with me now. That's also just nidrei. It has no meaning, and you don't even need hatar sadarim. That's what he means to say. Nidrei zuzim says, even if he doesn't eat with him, even if Shimon doesn't come to his house, he doesn't fulfill, the condition. Lo chayil nidra. That's what it means. Af. Rabbi Lezer is saying this is also a case of nidrei zuzim, like the first Mishnah on Chaf Hamid Beis and Chaf Alef Hamid Aleph. That's the first part of the Mishnah. Nidrei zuzim. Period or comma or semicolon. Now we have another case. But in the Dar of Kol Hashanah, if you want all your Nidarim, you don't want them to be to take effect, to be binding all year round. Yam Rosh Hashanah, get up on Rosh Hashanah, V'yom at the beginning of the year or any time, it means get up at the beginning of the year. Kol neder sheni asa lo, sheni asa lead, or any neder that I'm going to make in the future, yehei batel is void right now. Of course, this is hinting at Kol Nidre. We'll talk about Kol Nidre soon. But Kol neder sheni asa leador, yehei batel, it should be null and void. It's batel. Levad sheizocher b'shas neder. Now look at the Mishnah again on Amar Aleph. Kol nidre shani asa lidor hu batel. All nidram that I make this year are all null and void. I'm making them null and void right now. Uvad sheizocher b'shas neder. As long as I remember when I make the neder. As long as I remember when I make the neder, that's a little bit problematic, as we'll see now. The Gemara is going to know that. So now at least we understand the Mishnah and the Chesuri Mechsura. And he says, Kol neder shani asa lidor batel. It's batel. Uvad sheizocher b'shas neder. So the Gemara now says, wait a minute. If I remember when I make that, when you get up and you say at the beginning, you'll say Kol Nidre. Any dharm I make a null void. So this way, when I get angry during the year, something happens in shul, you get upset, something you make a neder. Don't worry, it's not chal because you already made it null and void at Kol Nidre. So I forgot about it. But if I remembered Kol Nidre. Right after Yom Kippur, they got upset. They didn't give me an aliyah on Yom Kippur. I got upset right away, right after Kol Nidre, and I swore I'm never coming here again, or whatever. Right? You made some neder, right? And right afterwards, and I remembered there was Kol Nidre. I remember last night was Kol Nidre, but I got upset right away now. But I remembered Kol Nidre. If I remember Kol Nidre, I said I don't care. I said Kol Nidre. I'm making a neder anyway. And as if I remembered when I made the neder later on. Let's say you made the neder on Yom Kippur. You said Kol Nidre Yom Kippur. Now Chanukah time, a few months later, you comes along, and I remember Kol Nidre. I don't care about the Kol Nidre. I'm making a neder anyway. That's what he says. Izocher, if I remembered when I'm making the neder, even if I remembered about the Kol Nidre, Akrila tonight, but I stopped it. I annulled the condition that I made, right? Akrila tonight, I approved it, I annulled it, but Kaim my Nidre. And now I've confirmed my neder. In other words, if I remember, it's one thing to say, if any norm that I make, I know I might make during the year, forget about it, they're bottle. Okay, you made them during the year, you forgot about with the condition you made at the beginning of the year, because at the time you were upset. Okay, it's null and void because you made it null and void, if that works. But if I remembered when I make the neder on Chanukah time, I'm upset now. I said, I don't remember, I know Kol Nidre. I remember I Kol Nidre. I don't care about the Kol Nidre. I said that then, but I don't want it to be effective anymore. So then the neder should be chal. That's what he says. If I remember, then I'm annulling the condition, right? I'm canceling what I've done, the kaimlan and nidre, and now I'm confirming. So what's the purpose? Exactly. What's the purpose? That's the kasha. If I remember when I make the neder, because he said, as long as I remember, at the beginning of the year, I can get up and say vato, but as long as I remember b'shas neder, when I make the neder on Chanukah time, a few months later, I remember. But if I remember, I'm canceling the kol nidre and I'm confirming the neder, so it should be a good neder.
Why is it like Jerusalem? You're saying it is.
No, here it's not. Here it's not Zeruzin. No, here's a no.
You don't mean.
No, with Zeruzin, you're encouraging somebody else to do something. No, not for a reason. You're encouraging somebody else. You're motivating somebody else. Here you're saying all real nadarim that I'm going to make during the year. I want it to be null and void.
Want the guy to believe it.
No, there's no guy. It's you. You yourself are saying in yourself.
No,
you're
case of Jerusalem, right?
In Jerusalem, it's just but it's understood that it's just motivated. No, that's all I did. No, we all know. The other guy knows that he doesn't really mean it. Everybody knows that they're just handling, or he's just encouraging. Please come to my house. If you don't come to my house, I never want to see you again. That kind of a thing. That's just encouraging. Nobody, they don't really mean it. Everybody knows he doesn't mean it. That's the idea of Jerusalem. You're just using it as a motivation tool.
Where are you going to dump? Of course you're going to back to
That's exactly it. They know you don't mean it. They know you don't mean it. That's exactly it. They know you don't mean it. They don't mean it. The guy here once got angry. He said, I'm never coming back again. And then as soon as he got off the steps, he said, where am I going to go? So he knew it right away. He knew it. But over here, you said, really, I'm making nadarim. I want to be batal non-void, real nadarim. So he's Abai changes the words of the Mishnah. It's not that he remembers. He doesn't say he makes a neder on Yom Kippur. He says, no, as long as he doesn't remember. If he remembers when he makes the neder on Chanukah, then he canceled Yom Kippur and the neder is chal. As long as he doesn't remember. If he doesn't remember, then the kol nidre helps. That's Abaye's answer. Rava says, no, I don't want to change the pshat in the Mishnah. I agree with you, Rava says, according to Abaye. Rava says to Abaye, I agree with you that if you didn't remember at all, when you made the neder on Hanukkah, you forgot about the kol nidre, so kol nidre takes away your neder. I agree with you, but I don't want to change the pshat in the Mishnah. I want to change the words of the Mishnah. Rava Malalim Kanamin Avikar, like we said. But Hachmaiskin, here's what happened. Go and Shehisna Barosh Hashanah. He stipulated on Rosh Hashanah, no, or Yom Kippur, whatever, Kol Nidre, no. But Lo Yada Ma'aseh, he remembers now, when he said over here in the Mishnah, as long as he remembers he made some sort of an eder on Yom Kippur, he doesn't remember what the details were. What does it mean? We say Kol Nidre, right? We say Kol Nidre, but the Gemara is not saying Kol Nidre. The Gemara is saying you made an eder on Rosh Hashanah. He made an eder on Rosh Hashanah. He says, any neder that I make, Kol neder shani osed lidor, let's say regarding wine or meat or something like that. Not all nedarim. He made a certain stipulation on Yom Kippur, and he forgot what the stipulation was. But he remembers. Now he's making a neder. Izocher b'shasa neder v'amar al das rishon ani noder nidre less from shashiv. He said, listen, I know I made it. I know I said on Yom Kippur something, but I don't remember exactly what I said. Right? I remember what I said, and I said, but I'm making the neder now as long as I am fulfilling what I said on Yom Kippur. I remember I forbade myself from something on Yom Kippur, from bread or something. I can't remember what it was. I'll make a neder now, but I'm making it, subservient to what I said on Kol Nidre. But if I said on Kol Nidre, I'm making it that I want that to be valid. Then his current neder has no neder if it goes against what he said on Yom Kippur. Lo amar al das rishona. But if he doesn't say al das rishoni noder, but if he says, listen, I don't care what I said. I know I said something on Yom Kippur. I don't care what I said. I'm not making al das rishoni. Whatever I said on Yom Kippur, I don't care. I care about what I'm saying right now. Then he canceled he canceled Yom Kippur, and he was mekayim the neder. So Rava says, of course, Abai is correct that if at the time that he made that on Hanukkah he forgot totally about Yom Kippur, then Yom Kippur works, because he said anything I say, well, the whole year is going to go by. I'm going to make all kinds of nedarim. I want them all to be null and void right now. That's good. If at the time that he makes a neder on Hanukkah or Pesach, he forgot about what he said on Yom Kippur, then Yom Kippur cancels it. But if he remembers, then there's a problem. He remembers I said something on Yom Kippur, can't remember what I said. If what I said goes against what I'm doing now, then I want Yom Kippur to be valid. I want that to overpower it. If not, I want Yom Kippur to trump what I'm doing now, trump what I'm doing on a Hanukkah or Pesach. But if I say, I don't care what I said on Yom Kippur, I want this neder to be chal right now, then he cancels Yom Kippur, and then it is chal. Rav Huna, he what?
Yes,
on his charat, right. Rav Huna bar Chinana savar l'midrash b'pirka. So Rav Huna bar Chinana wanted to paskin this halacha, and he wanted to give a drush about this, that you get up on beginning of the year and you cancel your nedarim. Amalei Rava, so Rava said to him, Tanaka mastem le'istume. The Tana of our Mishnah did not say this clearly, because the Tana of Mishnah listed it without a comma, like it's one long case about being Mario Chavero, that you want to eat with you, and you say something about this. In other words, he concealed it. The Tana of our Mishnah concealed the words. We don't want you to do this. We don't want you to say, okay, you know what? We don't want you to make the Dharm at all. It's not a good idea to make the Dharm. So we don't want you to get up and say, oh, and Yom Kippur, you know what? All of it I'm going to make a bottle, so I don't have to worry about it. I'll make the Dharm, I'll do it. The Tana of our Mishnah didn't want to say the case too clearly. He mixed it up with a different case of, if you don't eat in my house, you can't have any enough from me. In other words, he was trying to conceal it. And you want to darshan it publicly? So before we get to the run, just take a look over here. The Gemara goes on to say, okay, now, it comes out the way the Gemara explained with the Chsuri Mechsura. There's two cases that we listed as reason. The case with the 2 and the 4. I won't pay more than 2 for the item. You won't sell for less than 4. It's meaningless. Everybody knows that he doesn't really mean it. They both know they don't mean it. And it's not an edit. You don't need a touch dharma. Also, if I say, come to my house, and if you don't eat with me today, you can never have enough of me again. Also don't mean that. It's also not as reason. Why? Because Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov says in our Mishnah, Af Harotza, this case also. Harotza Ladus Chaver, Sheochel Etzlo. He tells him, if you don't eat with me today, you can never eat with me again. Right? Kol Nechasav Al Chaver, I ask all my assets on you if you don't eat with me today. That's also Neder Zeruzim. But this is Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov says it, not the Tanakhama, not the first Tan, not the Tanakhama. Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov says this is also a case. Does the Tanakhama agree with this case? That's the Gemara asks now. Iboilu, 2 lines from the bottom of the page. Iboilu, Pliga Rabbanan Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov. Do the Rabbanan argue with Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov? And they say this is not a case of Neder Zeruzin. Neder Zeruzin, I'm not going to pay more than 2. You say you're not going to pay less than 4. Everybody knows they're just handling over here. But over here, could be the guy serious. You're going to be serious. If you don't come to my meal now, you could, all my assets are forbidden for you. Maybe the rabbis would disagree with Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov and go, Elazar ben Yaakov says you don't even need a Tarsa Dharm here because this is Neder Zeruzin. Maybe the Rabbanan disagree. Ibola, Pliga Rabbanan Elazar ben Yaakov below. And the Ran says, if you look at the button,
I'm just saying, that doesn't sound like a measure.
what?
He says, if you don't come to me to eat, then you can't have any. It's not a
It's a
measure.
netter. It's a netter because he says, if you don't eat with me today, all my assets are forbidden to you like a carbon. That's a netter. If you fulfill that obligation, if you fulfill that condition, you don't eat with me today, that's going to be the repercussions. Now the Ran explains here 2 lines from the bottom of the page in the Ran. When you have a buyer and a seller and a buyer, everybody knows that what they say and what they really mean is not the same. Everybody says they all knew that they're gonna the bottom line, the price is gonna be 3 dinners. They knew that up front. So maybe the rabbis disagree and they would say that the case of Elazar ben Yaakov is not a case of Neder Zeruzin and you do need a Tzas Dharm or not. And if you say the Rabbanan do disagree with Elazar ben Yaakov in the case, is the halacha like Elazar ben Yaakov or not? So in tomorrow's Gemara, we're going to see proofs one way or the other about do the Rabbanan disagree with Elazar ben Yaakov? And if they disagree, is halacha like Elazar ben Yaakov or not? But before we get there, a couple of important things in the Ran. First of all, in the Ran Amar Aleph, he explains that the head to the Nadarim, the Ran in the wide lines in Amar Aleph, about 5-6 lines down in the wide lines, says the head to Nadarim, you need either a Yachid Mumcha, either a scholar, is machlokas whether he has to be Musmach or not, but you need a scholar or 3 Hadyotas, like we do at Tarsa Dharm with 3 regular people. You don't need rabbis for that. That's one important thing that the Ran points out. Another thing that the Ran points out here on the base is that, like I said, Rava doesn't disagree with Abaye, he just doesn't want to change the words of the Mishnah. Abaye said about Shaloye Zachar. Rava says if he doesn't remember B'Shas, he made that Eder on Pesach, what he said on Yom Kippur. Of course, he agreed. If he doesn't remember, everybody agrees that Yom Kippur overpowers, trumps what he said on Pesach. Rava just says that you don't want to change the words of the Mishnah. He says if he remembers when he makes the neder, but he doesn't remember exactly what he said. And he said, I'm making it on the condition that what I said before has an effect. Al Das or Rishona, then the current neder that makes on Pesach or Chanukah or whatever has no effect at all. But if he says, despite that, what I said then, I want it to be Chal, then it is Chal. And then the halacha, the Ran says on what I'm at Beis, when Chavkim Beis, halfway down in the wide lines, the Ran says, halacha kaim lan kurava. He remembers that he made it. He doesn't remember what he said. It depends if he said Al Das Rishona or not. Then the Ran goes on, and if you look at the Ran and the big lines in the Ran on Chavkim Beis, and 2, 4, 6, 8, 9 lines from the bottom of the page. Take a look at the Ran. You see Venera near the beginning of the line. 9 lines from the bottom of the page in the Ran, not in the tiny words of the of Tosfos and the Pirush Rosh. In the Ran, it says, Venera Shemasha Omer Mitzas Kilos B'Yom Kippur Kol Nidrei. This is the allusion to Kol Nidrei. Here he says Kol Nidrei. This that's some kilos on Yom Kippur they say Kol Nidrei, but Kol Nidrei. Sorry, all that. L'Dover Zehei Miskadlim. They're converted for this. L'Batal Nadarim She'idru Lachamikan. That's exactly what. The source of Kol Nidrei is our daf today. But the second part of the Mishnah, that second line that he says, if you want to be Mabatal, all the Nadarim you're going to make in the future, get up at the beginning of the year and say all the Nadarim I'm going to make are Batal. But as long as when you make the neder, you forgot what you said on Yom Kippur, or you remember you said something, and you say, "Well, I'm making the neder now on Pesach, Chanukah, or any other time during the year based on what I said then." So therefore, what I said Kol Nidrei trumps what I'm doing now, and there's no neder. Ella, the Ran goes on. Ella shalashona mashubash. The lashon that these some kehilas use on Yom Kippur, and they say Kol Nidrei is mistaken. Shenil misham shematir medam she'avru. It sounds from the way they say the lashon there is, if you notice that we have different lashonos in our machzorim also. It says it sounds like what they're saying is that they're mabatal the nedarim that they made in the past. You can't be mabatal neder. You can do ataras nedarim with a rabbi, right? Or with a rabbi with 3 adobes, you can do ataras nedarim. But this, if they say kol nidre, you get them say nedarim that we made last year are batal. That doesn't work because they ain't lo inyan elo nedarim abam lachamikan. You could say about the future. You could say what I say in the future has no effect. I don't mean it at all. Elo Shabbat Yaakov Zaloi Matakan Loshon. He's Matakan Loshon. Kadeshi Mashmusu Lahaba. Lomer Kol Nidre Sari Deasan of Dechoramna Kulo Komutz. Kadeshi Anir Laba. In our Machzorim today, we say so we're more specific. And as they're trying to correct that, the way he says this, Rabbi Yaakov also corrected. But he says you shouldn't say it at all anyway. Don't do a tarsa. Don't do Kol Nidre. You shouldn't make the Nedarim at all. That's not an answer. It's not an answer to say, okay, I'm going to continue swearing like I do all year round. I know we swear all the time. We make Nedarim, we make vows and shvuas. I'll just get up and I'll say, Kol Nidre, so I don't have to worry about it. No. The Tana, why? Because the Tana missed the Muslim like we said. We had the Gemara here, a few lines from the bottom of the page, right? Rav Huna wanted to darshan it publicly. You get up and Rav says, listen, the Tana concealed it. He didn't want to say it openly. He mixed it up with a different case so that we shouldn't do Karas Rosh, and you want to darshan publicly. It's not a good idea to advise people to do this because the Rambam says, some Gonim say it doesn't even help. You can't make a Tanai before. Tanai, what does that mean? The Tanai was on Yom Kippur, and now I'm making a neder. Masha Asar Atzmo, Lachem Kan. I answered it. I made a neder right now on Pesach. What's the difference? What I said about Yom Kippur, I said any neder I'm going to make don't mean anything. No, that doesn't mean that's what you said then. Now you're changing your mind. He says, Masha Asar Atzmo, Lachem Kan El Ben Adorim. Maybe it works by Nedarim because Nedarim is on the item. Avalo b'shvuas, but not shvuas. V'yesh misha omer shashvuas Nedarim shaven l'din zeh. If you swore up with somebody else and somebody else forswore you from having enough from them, then Kol Nidre doesn't work. Kol Nidre only works maybe on things that I'm going to forbid myself. I'm going to make a shvur myself. But if somebody else forbid me from their assets or somebody else was involved, maybe it doesn't work. So the Ran was not happy with Kol Nidre at all. You see, he wasn't happy with Kol Nidre as the Gemara's mashba went happy with Kol Nidre. Still, the rabbi said it maybe more openly. We say Kol Nidre. Because what would Yom Kippur be without Kol Nidre, right? Even though it has nothing much to do with kapara or atonement, slicha mechila at all. It has nothing to do with that at all. But that's what we understand Kol Nidre, yeah. Yes.
We don't ask what the neder was. We just say if you made a neder, we forgive it.
That's correct. That's correct.
That sounds kind of strange, isn't it?
No. That goes in line with what we saw on yesterday's Gemara. The hilchos of poskim b'charata. As long as you say, I regret it. I regret what I did. Again, it's not because of a circumstance. If it's a circumstance that could not be foreseen, as we said, ain't poskim b'nolad. It's something that couldn't be foreseen. But we assume that all the nedarim that we made are. We could have foreseen the circumstances. We could have seen what happened afterwards. That's good enough. That's good enough. You just say, I regret what I did. I don't want to do. I don't want. I don't want it. I'm upset with what I did. Even though I was happy maybe with the beginning of the year, but I'm upset now with what I did. What I've done. I could have foreseen that. That's good enough. That's good enough for charata. You don't have to go into the reasons. Why had you known this and this and this? That's good enough. That's how the Gemara passes. All right, we'll pick up here tomorrow with proofs. Do the rabbis disagree with Rav Meir Yaakov about that second case, about the case of if you don't eat with me today, I forbid all my assets to you? Or do they disagree with him? And if they disagree with him, who's the halacha like? We'll see that tomorrow.